You are Locked On Syracuse, your daily podcast on the Syracuse Orange. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Major recruiting service rankings for Sadiq White: ESPN 27th overall, 24/7 Sports 26th overall. On3 is his outlier, 48th overall, and Rivals, he's 32nd overall. So he's got a range between 26 and 48. So like Kiyan Anthony, a consensus top 50 overall recruit in the country, but he's ranked as high as 26th. He's a top prospect, just like Kiyan Anthony is. And similar to Kiyan, even though they are completely different players and will play completely different positions, there's a clear guy that's blocking him in the lineup. With Kiyan, it's JJ Starling. With Sadiq White, it's very clearly Donnie Freeman. Here's the good news about a guy like Sadiq White and why I'm really excited for him to take the floor with Syracuse basketball next season. He can defend. We talked about throughout the offseason and the height of portal season with Syracuse basketball that really they should be targeting guys who can either shoot or they can defend. Now, Sadiq White, he is known as one of the premier defenders in this year's high school recruiting cycle. And in my opinion, he might be the best defender right now on Syracuse basketball, because Syracuse basketball, you look top to bottom and with their lineup, they don't really have a lot of good defenders. Sadiq White comes here probably as the best defender on the team. So perhaps he can be a sort of a stopper for Syracuse this upcoming season. When he's in the lineup, he can guard multiple positions and he can shut down the other team's top player or one of the other team's top players. That's hopefully what a guy like Sadiq White can do when he is on the floor, which is provide an immediate impact on defense. Now, as far as his offensive game, here's what we know about Sadiq White. He is ultra athletic. He is someone who can get out in the break and he can play well above the rim. Ultra athletic, freaky, a guy who probably is going to have a couple of highlight reel dunks throughout the season, going to get some and ones in there as well. But I do wonder about his shot, and I ultimately believe that's why Sadiq White isn't rated higher than where he is right now. If he had maybe a better jump shot or better perimeter game, this guy could be a top 10 player maybe in the country. But because he's really just a great defender and probably a really good inside scorer, someone who can get out on the break, kind of limits where people are ranking him right now in high school. Now, he can develop a shot, but I don't think he necessarily has it right now. So where is Sadiq White in the lineup for Syracuse this upcoming season? He is, in my mind, the most likely of the four freshmen to see the most amount of minutes coming up and probably insert himself into the starting lineup. We talked about with Kiyan Anthony how he has JJ Starling in front of him, so it's going to be difficult for him to ever crack the starting lineup, even with Nate King's also there at small forward too. And there's no path for point guard. You got Nathan George there. So unless he gets hurt, he ain't seating the floor there at point guard. Luke Fennell, who we'll talk about in the next segment, he's got Nathan George ahead of him in point guard. Aaron Womack, he's got multiple players across multiple positions that are ahead of him. He's not going to play much next season. When you look at Sadiq White, yeah, he's got Donnie Freeman ahead of him right now in the lineup. Obviously, I don't see how Sadiq White is ever going to overtake Donnie Freeman in the lineup, similar to Kiyan Anthony and JJ Starling. But here is the difference. And we have talked about it so many times here, how important Syracuse's centers are on the roster, which are William Kyle and Ibrahim Soare. If those guys aren't getting it done next season, perhaps Donnie Freeman goes to the 5, which would not be his ideal position. But if they're just not cutting it at center, Adrian Autry might not have a choice. And that would leave power forward open for a guy like Sadiq White. But here's the $1 million question. When would Adrian Autry, and hopefully it doesn't come to it, by the way, I hope that William Kyle and or Ibrahim Soare hold up just fine at center so everyone can kind of play their natural position. But if it doesn't happen, and it's really a big if, the center spot, right? When does Adrian Autry make the call to switch things up and to put Donnie at the 5 and put Sadiq White at the 4? It's going to depend also on how is Sadiq White playing. Because if he's not playing well, you're not going to give him more minutes. But if he is playing well and the centers are struggling, when does Adrian Autry say, all right, enough's enough. I'm putting Sadiq White in the starting lineup and I'm moving Donnie Freeman to the 5? And so I went back and I did a little bit of research with Adrian Autry, like what should we expect? And I think it would be later than you think. Because a couple of years ago, remember when Syracuse got Naheem McLeod from Florida State? He started all 14 games for Syracuse basketball that season when he was healthy. Obviously, he had that season-ending foot injury, which was unfortunate for him. But when he was on the floor, or when he was healthy, he started. Even though he really, I think we could tell pretty early on. I know I wasn't the host of the podcast yet, but we could tell probably pretty early on that he just wasn't a starting caliber center in the ACC. Sure, he could be a fill-in every once in a while. He can be a backup. Okay, fine. But he was not a starting caliber big man in the ACC. And Autry stuck with him. Autry stuck with him throughout the season until Naheem McLeod went down with a season-ending injury. So I wonder what he will honestly do if William Kyle and Ibrahim Soare aren't cutting it. Is he just going to stick with them and say, we really don't want Donnie Freeman playing the 5? We don't want Sadiq White playing the 5 either. So we're just going to have to bite the bullet with the center position and hope that they're not too much of a liability and we could still win games? Maybe. Or maybe Adrian Autry says, you know what, I want to be a little bit different than where I was in 2024 with Naheem McLeod and say, you know what, it's not working. Let's try something else.